My name is James Martini. I work for a group called the Center for Workforce Information and Analysis. We're part of the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry. We'll get into who we are and what we do here, and then go through about 3 or 4 different things that I wanted to cover today. A couple things about me. I'm pretty easygoing. If I don't see your hand or something, you can just yell James. I'd much rather take questions as they come up. Odds are if you have one, somebody else in the room, especially with this many people, is going to have a question or something similar as well. I hope everybody enjoyed their wonderful Penn Stater lunch and isn't too groggy after the good food. Okay, so who we are. As I said, we work as part of the Department of Labor and Industry. We do all of the labor market information for the state of Pennsylvania. That includes statewide and for all the local areas. There is a similar entity in every state in the country that runs all the Bureau of Labor Statistics programs. Some of the Employment and Training Administration funds flow through our bureau. But we do everything on the labor force that you hear about on a monthly basis, the unemployment rate, the number of jobs. All those big headline numbers that come out at the beginning of the month for the nation come out about halfway through the month for the state. We also put together a ton of information on industries, occupations, what people make, what we expect the workforce to look like 10 years from now. We also field a variety of questions that don't fit into any of the program areas that we specifically work on. We'll get questions from the governor's office or from legislators about demographics in local areas. I had a friend that works over at the lottery that calls me from time to time to get demographic information on age about areas across the state. Apparently, some of the older Pennsylvanians that benefit from the lottery also enjoy playing the lottery a whole lot. So there's a few things I want to cover today. I want to talk about our website and where it is. I want to talk about the Pennsylvania Career Guide. If you didn't get a chance to grab a copy of that, I brought about 100 with me today. Actually, it should be exactly 100. We're going to have to talk to the publisher that does it for us. I don't want to take any home, so if there's some left at the end, please feel free to grab them. I'll cover this more when we get to it, but if you need them for your local area, we'll talk about how you can get those, and if you run into any roadblocks, how we can remedy and make sure that those are getting into the hands of the job seekers that we want them to. And then there's a couple of career exploration tools I'm going to talk about. One's the Pennsylvania Job Gateway System, and then also a product that we had a few years ago that went away that we are now working diligently to bring back, which is the PA Career Edge. I don't know if anybody remembers that from before. There were a lot of people that liked it. Was really disappointed when it went away. I'm very happy that we're going to be able to get it back. As I mentioned, we provide all that labor market information to people, create the reports that we're mandated to by the federal government. One of the things we do is calculate performance outcomes. So if there's any workforce money that flows through a program, we want to see that those people were properly trained and were placed in the workforce, what kind of outcomes we expect them to get. And we also do a lot of analysis on the unemployment compensation program. Remember a few years ago, the Act 60 and 60 went through, so there's work search requirements on there. We do actuarial analysis on the solvency of the trust fund, things of that nature. And as you can see, or maybe not see, almost everything we do is free to the general public. There are very, very rare instances where somebody will have some grant money sitting around from something that they want us to do a special report on. We put together a career guide for oil and gas jobs a few years ago for some folks up in the northwestern part of the state, things of that. But 99% of the time, if you have a request for us, it's something that we're already paid to do. So there's no cost associated with the information we provide. This is a slide. This is a presentation I typically give with a few other folks in our office. This is probably the only time I'm going to be nitpicky about anything in the presentation. They always like me to go over the difference between an industry and an occupation because oftentimes people get confused between the two. The easiest way I can explain it is an industry is what your company does or your place of business does, and an occupation is what you do there. So for instance, you could work in the mining industry or the construction industry, or you can work for an accounting firm. Those are the industry that you're in. If you are a carpenter, that's your occupation within the construction industry. If you're running the power inside the mine, you're an electrician, that's your occupation. And a lot of occupations go across all industries, like your secretaries, your managerial positions, so on and so forth. The one that everybody trips up on is they want to hear information from us on the IT industry. There's not really a thing the way that we code data. Information technology is part of every industry, and IT professionals are an occupation that works in all those industries. So just something to keep in mind if you ever go out on our site and look at our data about what that distinction is. Okay, this is our website, and I love pointing out my own mistakes. You'll notice on your handouts, I believe it's the second slide, says our website is now www.workstats.pa.dli.gov. That is incorrect. The PA and the DLI are flip-flopped. I always just put in workstats or PA workstats in Google and it comes up. But yeah, absolutely, I absolutely do. I've got. They said 80. And I really thought I was. A lot of people think that. Yeah, man. I'm glad I brought 80. I thought I was killing a tree for no reason. If we want to just take some down and pass them around, I would appreciate that greatly. I apologize about our little mix-up there, but the website is, if you put in PA Workstats in Google, it'll still come back as the first search result for you. And that'll take you to pretty much everything that we have here as far as our data. So go back a slide here, actually. What you'll see over here on the top left, there's a lot of things going on. Some of our most common and featured products are over here on the right. In the middle are your top line numbers, your state unemployment rate, number of jobs, stuff like that. Anything we newly put out, we'll put on the left. But by and large, anything that you're going to want to find, go to Products A to Z. Click on that, and that'll bring you to the next page here. Sorry, I keep walking in front of the thing. I think I might even be able to do this through. I don't even want to try. Figure something's going to either go wrong or catch on fire. The ones with the stars on them there are the ones I'm going to talk about today. Those are just some of the ones that tend to be more, some of our more popular products. There's a lot of other great stuff on here as well. I highly recommend you go out and check it out. If you have any questions, like I said, I have cards back there. Contact information for our office is also included as the last slide in here. So if you ever get to anything and you're like, hey, this is really cool, but I don't have it for my area, or I want to know exactly what this means, we have an entire little section within our bureau that handles nothing but customer requests. I believe it has 4 or 5 folks in there now. And they just love to answer questions and help people find the information they're looking for. So, but pretty much everything we do is going to show up on the Products A to Z list. Over here, so stop walking in front. So we, again, we break things down by industry and occupation. This slide is something called occupational groups. Everything's based on coding system that goes from very specific up to very general. The layout on here, more than anything, gives you an idea of what our projections data looks like. For every one of these occupational groups, we also put this information together for very specific occupations. Like say in the production occupations, we also have welders, solderers, cutters, and brazers. And we'll provide you with what the estimate of the employment was a couple of years ago. It takes us a while to put together all the data. And then what we expect the employment in that occupation to be come 2024. We'll give you the volume change, the percent change. Once you get into that projections data, and I think I have a slide on this later, we'll also show you that the number of openings that we expect to have based on growth, and then also from replacement. And that's a very important thing to remember, that just because an occupation isn't necessarily growing in volume over the 10 years, there's going to be a lot of people that leave those jobs that we're going to need to backfill those positions. One of the ones that's, yes, sir.
Where's the data coming from for you to project to 2024?
Okay, that comes from a couple different things. All of the occupational data starts off from surveys that go out to employers. All the occupational data is survey-based. All our industry data comes from something called the Quarterly Census of Employment and Wages, which is a cooperative program we do with unemployment compensation. Everybody that pays unemployment compensation or has that taken out of their check, which is about 98% of all people that work in the state, that data gets given to us. We code the companies based on what industry they're in. Then we select companies out of there to do what we call a panel. Then we survey a whole bunch of companies in there until we can get to a statistically critical mass. And then use that information to give us our baseline on the occupations. And then the feds provide us with information, basically an algorithm and software programs that we input based on local economic conditions, national trends, and so on and so forth, what we expect the occupations to be. I will be completely frank with you. I went back, I had some free time, a little bit of it, and went back and looked at the projections from 2004 to 2014 to see how well that 2014 column matched up. And there were some places where it was a bit of a miss, but by and large, it was actually pretty accurate. I was pretty impressed. There were certain things that when we were coming up with the projections back then, like the housing crisis, some of the construction-related occupations didn't really align to what they were projected to get out to, but we use the same process as all the other 49 states do, and it's really a BLS-driven model, the Bureau of Labor Statistics model. So does that answer your question? Okay, cool. Back to the growth versus replacement. One of the things that we've always, the one I always like to highlight are electrical power line installers. We have additional data sets where we can go and look in demographics by occupation, and something like, I think it's close to 40 or 50% of the individuals working in that occupation are 55 and older. So that we might not need necessarily a ton more than we have right now, but we're going to need a ton of new people to go into those jobs. There's going to be a tremendous opportunity and need for people to do that work, just because so many people are getting to that retirement age. So, any questions on the occupational groups or the projections data as a whole? Yeah, go ahead.
How do you said the products A to Z, and then you flip to this one. Where do you get to that?
This product actually is, this slide isn't actually a specific page you can go to, but if you go back one slide, and I'll get out of the way, it should be under occupational projections. It's the second one on the right from the top. All those occupational groups are listed in there, but over the 20 or 25 pages in the PDF document, each occupational group is listed. First, you're going to have management, business, and finance, and those are all the 11 categorized occupations, and then all the specific ones that fall in there will be listed, and then it'll go to computer engineering. So basically, when we put this slide together, we pulled all the top lines from those groupings, but all that information is in there. The nice thing about the projections data too is that we do this for the state, and then we also do this for local workforce investment area too. Yeah, it's workforce development area now. They changed the name. WDA just doesn't sound as good as we have, but as long as we have a critical mass of data to put out the information, we can give you local projections as well, which I know are going to be a lot more helpful than a statewide number. Not all areas of the state are the same. They have different needs, different industrial makeups, and they're going to require different occupations to fill out those jobs. All right, this is a slide one of my colleagues put together just to give people an idea of what we do project the workforce to look like in 10 years, or I guess 7 years at this point. But she categorized them into today, tomorrow, and future, where the today jobs are jobs that you can pretty much with high school education or a GED or a very reasonable component of on-the-job training you can go into and work. The tomorrow jobs are jobs that we expect to require some type of associate's degree or some type of industry recognized training. And then future are all the jobs that require a bachelor's degree or higher. As you can see, the today jobs make up more than half of what's needed. So I always am reluctant to say this to a room full of people that work in education. There is still a huge demand for jobs that don't necessarily require a huge component of higher education. That being said, as you work your way down, the jobs tend to be more likely to provide family-sustaining wages and good wages in general. So this is in no way a knock on people bettering themselves and gaining skills. Just a way to look at what the workforce is going to look like. Yes, sir.
Tomorrow and future.
The tomorrow is typically an associate's degree or something in that neighborhood. It doesn't necessarily have to be an associate's degree. It can be something between just getting your GED or high school education and that post-secondary work, and then future is anything bachelor's degree and above.
Okay, so you're not looking at a time frame tomorrow being 5
No, this is her nomenclature she came up with to say that this is a job you could walk into and get today,
Okay.
versus something you're looking further out in the future if you want to go to school for 4 or 5 years and get into that line of work. So it's more about the requirements of training rather than like what the workforce of the future is going to look like, if that makes sense. Yes,
Where
sir.
did this data come from? Because this is much different than I see from other sources, U.S. Department of Labor.
I'd be interested to see what you have from USDOL and how they define it, because it might be slightly different.
Yeah, theirs is talking 60% associate's degree, maybe 30% bachelor's, and 10% directly out of high school.
I don't have 100% answer to give you on that one, and maybe we can sidebar after this. What that possibly may be is the new jobs that come available over the next 10 years. This is what the total workforce is going to look like, and I believe that might explain the discrepancy between the two. The way we arrive at these is we take all those occupations and projections and then match them to the employer or industry group reported necessary educational level to move into those. I will tell you though, and there's no reason not to be frank about this. The Bureau of Labor Statistics and government in general tends to be a little bit behind the times in how they classify things. Up until this most recent round of the occupational coding structure and the way that the education requirements were defined, registered nurses, this is the first year that they're being counted as requiring a bachelor's degree. That's something that always bugged me. I've been in our office for almost 10 years now. When I started, it reported that you only needed associates, and part of the reason for that is because it's based on the entirety of the number of people working in that occupation, not just the new requirements for new entrants into that field. So there's still a ton of people, and my grandma retired probably 8 or 9 years ago from nursing. She got trained at the hospital she worked at. She didn't have an associate's degree or a bachelor. She was a certified nurse because the hospital used to, that's just not the model any businesses go with anymore, but it's an artifact of trying to show what is versus, and I think it falls in the exact same line as you're talking about with what the BLS or ETA is putting out with. And that's a very good point, that 60% of the jobs that are coming out are going to require, for new entrants into the field. So I think that's a very important thing to bring up, and I appreciate it. One of the things we get asked about all the time is what are the hot jobs out there? What are the best places to steer young people or transitional adults into careers? And one of the challenges with that is there's multiple ways to define what the hot jobs are going to be. The 3 ways we looked at it here are by volume growth, by percentage growth, and by annual openings. So you can see that some of them show up on multiple lists. Volume growth, we're going to need a ton of registered nurses, food workers, home health aides, truck drivers. The truck drivers, I will tell you, I think is an artifact of a data system because I'm very nervous that in 10 years they're all going to be self-driving, but that's, our models don't take into anything that Google and Tesla are figuring out. But you can see that there's different occupations on all of these depending on how you look at it. Oftentimes the one that rises to the top by percentage growth are going to be smaller just because if you add 100 jobs into a field that only has 1,000, it's going to show a much larger percentage growth than if you add 1,000 jobs into a field that has 100,000 people working in it. But just the point I want to drive home with this slide and why it's included, there's multiple ways to look at data and come up with answers that are technically correct to the exact same question that might not be the same answer. So I don't want to dwell on that too much, but if anybody had any questions, I'm certainly happy to. I think that's a pretty straightforward. Again, this is just more of a display of what it looks like for the different, whether it's by openings, whether it's by percentage growth or by volume growth. You can see that there's a ton of annual openings for all these jobs. But this is the type of information that if you click on any of our projections data, you're going to see current employment, projected employment, the change. And then we provide wage data for all of these. There's average wage. A lot of times somebody gets into a field, they say, well, the average wage is $50,000 and I'm only making 30. It might be better to look at the entry-level wage, the experienced wages for people that have obviously been there a while, and the longer you're in a job, the more you tend to make. And again, this isn't to say that any of these are better opportunities for any individual than any other ones. Depends on what people are, what their skill set is, what type of education they have, and a very important component, I think, that gets lost in data sometimes is what people are interested in. You can have a great skill set and all the knowledge to do something. If you have no interest in doing it, it's going to be very hard to make that work. I tell that to a bunch of people that work in education. I think the point's already made, right? So as far as the Pennsylvania Career Guide, that's the next thing I wanted to touch on. Those are the documents I brought here. We have boxes and boxes of these sitting back in our office, so if any of you work directly with students and you want additional copies, I believe they're trying to make you go through your local workforce development boards for distribution of these, but if anybody runs into any problems, feel free to reach out to me. We do what we can to make sure that we get these out to people. The last thing I want to see is a whole bunch of them sitting in my office because no one's using them then, to be completely frank. But there's a lot of great information in here. It is, I believe, it's the 25th year that we've done this. So we've been doing this since back in the early 90s. We put these out. A couple years ago, they tried to go all online with this. It really didn't work out well. A lot of people still feel comfortable using an actual hard copy of something. For a lot of folks, one of the best populations we have, or one of our most avid users of this, are folks that are soon to be re-entrants in the criminal justice system. And those folks aren't allowed to have email, and their internet access is incredibly restricted. So being able to have hard copies of it again it has been a real positive thing for us. Just a couple of things that are included in there. We do provide an interest assessment. It's nothing incredibly substantial. It's just kind of one of those things to get the ball rolling if somebody doesn't know exactly what they want to do. I believe it's less than a 10-minute interest assessment. It gives you some letters that align to our job bank with all the data to say like, hey, I'm a letter A, this fits in well with these type of jobs. But just something to get the conversation going. We provide a lot of that wage and job outlook information from our projections for a lot of the most popular jobs. The spotlight articles are really great with counselors. There's one, and I think we have it in again this year, where we talk about the odds of you becoming a professional athlete, because everybody thinks they're going to make it. Another one, I don't know if it's in there this year, but another one we've had in previous years has been television versus reality, where I always like to point out, at one point there were more CSI shows on television that you could watch every night than there were annual openings for crime scene investigators. You know, everybody sees it, they're like, man, I'd be really good at that. And we're like, yeah, there's like 2 people hired in that job every year, and they probably have doctorates. And none of them get to carry guns. We put in a budget worksheet. This was a new thing this year, just because especially for kids that might be going directly into the workforce, getting their own apartments, or even going to school. We find that this component, and hopefully this is, you know, maybe getting better in schools, but this is something that a lot of kids aren't leaving secondary ed with a skill to be able to create a budget. So this is something we can work into a lesson plan. The to-do list for high schoolers has always been one of my favorite things in the document. We break it out into 3 paths. I believe it's for people looking to go directly into the workforce. I think there's a path in there for folks looking to go into the military, and then there's a pre-college path. But it breaks it out month by month, like what you should be doing. Like, this is when you get your FAFSA in, this is when you need to take your SATs. Or if you're going on the work path, this is when you need to start getting your resume out. This is when you need to start, you know, practicing interviews, things along that line. Excuse me. There's also sources of financial aid in there, some articles on how to best navigate that process. We have alternative options to college. I think more and more is the cost of, and I apologize, I'm losing my voice a little bit. As the cost of college just keeps climbing and climbing at a way faster rate than inflation or return on investment, people are looking for alternative ways to make themselves more marketable for employers, rather than spending, you know, going into debt $150,000. I still have framed on my wall paying off my student loans in my office, so I can certainly sympathize with anybody that doesn't want to go that route. We have job seeking tips in there. We have information on the PA CareerLink system. And then we have contact information for a bunch of different state agencies for various things. Did anybody have any questions about the career guide before I move on to the other stuff about presentation?
Are there plans to update the middle school version of the career guide?
You know, that's something we talked about, and originally, if you look on the products list, it's still on there, the old one. What we found is there was a lot of duplicative information between the high school one and the middle school one. I think in a lot of ways what we ended up doing is just leaving out some of the high school information from the middle school one. So we've been bouncing around a couple of different ideas. We've been talking with the administration. I don't know that we have 100% clear path that we want to go. But at one point the talk was to make one for students and make one for more adult job seekers, just because one of the things we've really found, and one of the things I've personally found going around and talking to folks around the state that work with adult folks, is they've been in a lot, especially during the recession. There were folks that were in the same job for 20 or 25 years, and then it went away, and they walked into that job out of high school. They hadn't written a resume. They never have. They haven't been on an interview in 25 years. That's definitely a population that we weren't necessarily serving properly. So there's a possibility of doing 2 distinct ones. There's a possibility of just trying to incorporate more information in for the adult dislocated worker and even the re-entrant population, just because so many folks, with some of the reforms they're trying to do in the criminal justice system, are going to be re-entering the labor force as well. So, yes, sir.
This isn't really about the career guides, but you said something that makes me think of this. Is there anything out there that shows that cost benefit, return on investment for going to college? Because everything that gets sent really to school, high schools, and to the guidance department always shows well, if you have a college degree over your lifetime, you will earn this much more than the person who does not have a college degree. But those numbers always factor in the doctor and the lawyer and
Sure.
and the engineer that's making.
And not the French poetry major?
Right, and not the French poetry major, so. is
Not that there's
anybody-
anything wrong with that, if anybody went that route, it's
Is there
important to know.
anything out there that really shows that actual possible return or lack of return on investment?
That's not something we've ever put out that I'm aware of, but I have seen stuff like that where it really breaks down. You know, if you want to go into a job straight off the bat earning $50,000 a year versus one that's making 60, and then you're taking, it fits in, it's similar to what the budget worksheet we have is, because you calculate in what your student loan repayment is. But yeah, I've seen that like over the course of a lifetime, anybody that completes a 4-year degree versus someone that doesn't makes an extra $500,000 over the course of their career. And it does, it factors in all those other things. If you want to get in touch with me, I'd be certainly be willing to look at it, because I think it's an important piece of information. And you're starting to see, and maybe it's just something I perceive, but I think you're starting to see a sea change where we're getting away from what I thought was a really misguided model that every child should go to college. And I think you're starting to see more people understanding that, you know, that there's certainly nothing wrong or less about going and learning a skill and earning an honest living that way too. You know, that's a huge cultural shift. And part of the, and I don't want to get too far off base, but part of that goes into the NIMBY, not in my backyard economic principle, where everybody says more people should go into trades, and then when you tell them what's your kid doing, like, well, they're definitely going to go to college, and you know, and that's a big challenge. But anything we can find out there to show that there is a good value to be had by learning a skill, I think is something that's valuable to get out there. So I think that's a good point. Yes, sir.
One of the videos that's been pointed out a few times here, and I've used for about 1.5 years, 2 years, is Success in the New Economy. It's about a 10-minute video.
Okay.
It addresses much of this. You know, what's a superstar plumber make in comparison to an average businessman? Sure, even though it looks on all the charts like one is so much better, what's it really worked out to be in real life? It's called Success in the New Economy. And it's about a 10-minute video. It is a warning. It is put out by a technical college, so they have an angle.
You know,
But it's the other angle than what you normally hear.
Well, it's important to get out all sides of something. I think everybody got an angle, right?
We have used that in Westmoreland County with a lot of our people, but part of our county has a forum with our superintendents, our chambers, our business leaders, our school counselors are involved now. And our county went and actually did one that is based off of our county.
Yeah.
It looks at the same stuff. So it kind of helped that it was actually the business leaders that were doing it. The
Right.
college did not have it. And then it just showcases what we need in Westmoreland County. And it's still playing off the 127 and the same concepts. But they did a good job with seeing it as well, that it wasn't a technical school that did it. But the information is very good.
I keep hearing you say 4 years for an RN. A lot of our students, especially from the tech centers, are going into 2-year RN programs.
Are they?
Is there a push now that it has to be 4 years and we don't know now, or?
That's.
But they get paid the same thing.
They do when they get in. I think one of the concerns there, depending on, that's going to depend on local economies and local hiring ability too. I think you're going to find that in some of the more competitive markets, you're going to be at a disadvantage with just the associates, because given the opportunity to hire 2 people at the same pay rate, they're going to take the person with more education. But I know, like, I've talked to the folks that work out the workforce board at North Central and seen the grants that they've submitted. They're having a huge problem with getting registered nurses in their area because they leave and go to higher paying areas. So in that instance, you know, the way that they say that it's a 4-year thing is based on 50% or more of the people in that occupation require or have that degree.
It's not a requirement.
I don't believe so, and I think it might be specific to an employer. I'm sorry, sir.
To that, the RN thing, my wife is an RN, she finished like at a 2-year at a community college. So what that limits her though is some insurance companies are requiring that, like, the hospitals won't hire any two-year RNs. They'll require a bachelor's degree to be hired in the hospital because of the billing through the insurance company. So like, that doesn't limit though, like your home health nurses or your, like, she works in an addiction or rehab center. Like, they will take RNs with two-year degrees. That is really being driven by the Obamacare and insurance requirements of quality of care for the RN.
Okay.
Requiring a full year. That's where that's coming from.
But the realism's gonna be they need 148,000 by 2014.
Right.
2024, I mean. So the reality is they're gonna have to take everything down nursery.
Well, and-
Right, that's where it's at.
Right.
Yeah, well, and that's part of what happened too. We went through a pretty, I mean, that recession we went through was pretty bad. And we got to a point where I think there was a McDonald's out there. This might have been one of those horror stories, but they were requiring their folks that they were hiring to have a bachelor's degree. It got to be very, very much a buyer's market as far as employers for workers, because there was so much slack in the labor market. When we were sitting there at 10% unemployment, employers could say, you know, I know that we only required you to have, you know, a two-year degree before, but we're hiring people with master's degrees to do this because we can. Now that the unemployment rate's down around 4% again, I think you're gonna see employers have to be a little less choosy. And I think that's gonna help a lot of folks that were kind of on the sidelines get back into the labor market. Not to get too macro on this whole discussion, but yeah, you're right. They're gonna need to come from somewhere. And yeah, so.
We just have a lot of great two-year schools all over the place.
Absolutely. Any other questions about the career guide before I hop on to the more or less interactive job search type stuff that we have on here? All right, cool. Did anybody here go to the presentation this morning on the career readiness stuff that was done by the gentleman from the Department of Ed? All right, I was there too. I grabbed him afterward and asked him, as far as the career search or career exploration requirements, he seemed pretty confident that some of those can be fulfilled using these systems if there's some type of lesson plan built around them. So I just wanted to throw that out ahead of time. Maybe plant that seed as to how you could use these to fulfill those requirements using existing tools that are already available for free in the classroom. So, for what that's worth. The first one I'm going to talk about is Pennsylvania's Job Gateway system. This is something that was actually done, revamped under the Corbett administration. They looked at our old CWDS system. If anybody's used that before, basically anybody that's been around for more than 6 or 7 years that had to enter any information in there, it was very cumbersome. It was outdated. It was very government-y. They basically gave it a facelift, and in the process of that, they included a bunch of career exploration tools and career readiness tools that I think really added a ton to the site. Every state in the country has to have a labor exchange portal where employers can go on and post jobs, and people can go on and apply for those jobs. It works in conjunction with their one-stops. In PA, we call those one-stops career links, but every state has a similar type program. Ours really went above and beyond. The stuff I'm going to talk about today are the career tools that are built into the system. We've worked with different vendors across the country to bring in some additional technology and capacity into this system that was not previously available. And I'm not really aware of a lot of other states that took what their labor exchange portal can do and expanded it in this way. Unfortunately, I think someone who runs the system realized I wasn't a real job seeker and shut down my profile. So I usually demo these live, and I did it last 2 weeks ago, and it was fine. When I went to log in today, it says I'm in there, but I don't know, it's a mess. I'm sure it's something I did. That being said, I do have screenshots of all the programs, and I can tell you in pretty good detail what they do. The first one is something called TORC. It's probably the most government-y name I've ever heard for anything. It stands for Transitional Occupation Relationship Quotient. I repeat that, but I don't think anybody wants to hear it again. What this does is allows you to put in a job that you have worked, and then a job that you want to work, and it gives you what are called torque scores based on the KSAs from ONET as to what gaps you need to bridge to go from one job to the other. If you put in that you were a cashier, it'll give you a list of suggested jobs. It'll give you a score for knowledge on each of them. It'll give you a score for abilities, and it'll and one for skills. And it's also color coded like a stoplight, so that anything that appears in green says you're going to have a pretty easy transition from one to the other. Anything in yellow says, hey, you might need to get a little bit of upskill, a little bit of training, and anything in red pretty much means like you need to get either some additional work experience, you need to get some additional education, because this is going to be a much harder gap to bridge. It's a pretty neat tool. In addition to providing those scores and the numbers, it also provides a resource library, and there's also the ability to print out the form. One of the things we've found, and this is true for most of the career tools we have in here, oftentimes when you're working with students or even if you're working with older adults that are trying to make a career change, those decisions aren't made on the spot and they aren't made in a vacuum. You're going to end up, especially with the young people, they're going to want to go home and talk to their parents and say, hey, these are the jobs I'm considering pursuing based on what I like doing here and what I've done already. It allows you to export out or print out, I believe it's a 6-page report that they can then go home and take home and have that discussion around the dinner table and say, hey, what do you guys think of it? And I'm sure there's a lot of people who's, especially when you're talking the educational side of it or next steps, their parents are either going to help pay for that or they're going to need to co-sign on their on any types of loans they take out. So obviously that's going to be a decision that's made by more than one person. The nice thing with all these tools is they're all included in the free Job Gateway package. You do have to create a registration in order to use them. If you're in like a counselor setting, you can create a registration for yourself and let people go in with you while you're there and use it, or they can create their own profile and it'll save all the information for them. But really they're there. The one caveat I always want to make sure to let people know is to make sure you have pop-ups enabled, because when you click on anything within the Job Gateway system, and I apologize, this is a lawyer thing, if you're leaving a Commonwealth-run site and hosted site and exiting out to a non-Commonwealth site, we need a pop-up disclaimer to come up that says we're not responsible for any third-party content available. Lawyers. Nobody's a lawyer here, right? I'm sorry if you are. The family members that are lawyers, they're great. But yeah, make sure your pop-ups are turned off, long story short. So did anybody have any questions about Torque? Okay, there's 3 more of these and then I can get into career coach, which is probably my favorite. Oh, and there's all the answers right there. The next one on here is virtual job shadow. I think everybody knows what a normal traditional job shadow is. What we did with this is try to incorporate a way that this can be done from the classroom. Out of we code or classify about 850 unique occupations that people do in Pennsylvania. This takes all that information, basically everybody's familiar with ONET, heard of ONET. It brings all that information from ONET in, all the KSAs, and has reports on what basically a day in a life is someone doing that job is. For about half the a little less than half, they're adding to it all the time. I think there's 350 or so right now that have associated videos on there. They're typically between like 5 and 7 minutes. They're not super long, but they go out and they find somebody like with an RN. They go out and actually find a nurse working in a hospital, and they walk you through a day of what they're doing. Like, I'm going to go over here and draw some blood, and then I'm going to go over here and talk to this patient, and then things of that nature. And rather than having somebody stand up here and explain what a nurse does, it actually shows you a nurse explaining what that does, or somebody working on a construction site, what a day in their life looks like, what the safety requirements are, what kind of training they had to get in there. It incorporates our projections data for what we expect that occupation to look like in the future. There are also magazines, some additional videos on soft skills and interviewing included in there. And then it also links into all the job postings that are available on the Job Gateway site. It includes those, so if they watch a video and say, hey, this is for me, they can go right out to that list that's already state-approved job postings. And there's also a link to training providers in the local area too. That's based on your registration, your hometown. You can set the distance to all training providers within 50 miles that can help me get into that job. So I found them to be really a lot more informative and higher production quality than what you're going to find at like Career One Stop or something like that. So it's another value-added thing we put in here. Anything on the virtual job shadow before I hop along? Okay. This one's called Big Interview. Personally, this is probably my absolute favorite just because I have a little bit of a personal interaction with this one. I know that there are, they did surveys, they used to talk about them when I was in school, that there were, they surveyed a bunch of college kids, and the number 2 thing that they were afraid of was dying. The number 1 thing they were afraid of was public speaking. Interviews were somewhere real close in there. This is a tool we put in here that helps people develop their interview skills. I hadn't really used this program a whole lot or had much experience. My sister had just finished some additional education to get her critical care certification in nursing. Excuse me. And had to go into another round of interviews, and she was horrified about it, didn't want to do it. And I said, hey, we got this thing on our website that you can take a look at. So basically it allows you to hook up a webcam to your computer, and the person pops up on the screen and asks you interview questions, and then you practice giving responses, and then it'll take that video and give you feedback on things like your cadence, your eye contact, stuff like that. You can set it up to be industry specific for the type of interview questions you're going to get. You can set it for like healthcare, or if you want to work in manufacturing. They'll ask you questions that are typical in those fields. They also have a feature called interview roulette, where you answer one question and then a new person pops on the screen and asks you a completely different, unrelated question to keep you on your toes. I will tell you, I haven't personally used it, but she went through, did all the modules. She absolutely loved it. Her confidence in going into interviews went from next to nothing to I'd say pretty good. I wouldn't say she's an all-star or it's her favorite thing to do, but every little bit of confidence in those settings helps. It has her endorsement, which in turn gives, I will endorse it as well. There's also a lot of resources on here, online periodicals, videos, tips, stuff of that nature to help with, getting people to, it's really just a big confidence game as far as interviewing. It's selling yourself, so the more confidence you have and the more tools you can use to help enhance that are available there. Yes, sir?
In the Big Interview, are there like basic questions, whereas,
Yes.
I mean, if you're dealing with a freshman in high school versus somebody who's getting a nursing degree, the level of question would be different, so.
Yes.
Just for students out of the gate, tell me something about yourself, what are your strengths, weaknesses, things like that.
That's a great point. It is set up so that you can go through, it's hierarchical. So if you're just starting off and doing those basic things, you can go in there and do easier questions. And that kind of fits into the industry specific versus the general as well. I'm not even sure. I believe at one point, I'm not sure if it's still in there or they added it in and took it out, but I believe it's in there. I think there's even stuff for like admissions type interviews in there as well too, or at least it can be used for that. So, Any other questions about the big interview? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
All of these things that you just covered in the last three slides, I'm actually in Job Gateway, is that under career services?
If you go on Job Gateway, so you have a registration, you're logged in. So if you go over to Career Services, and I think it's 3 down, it'll say Career Tools. That's exactly where they are. Because I had my problems with my login, I usually do this part live, and I show a video, and I show how the interview questions work, and that's really on me, and I apologize for that. I'm not sure what's going on the technology side there, but yeah, that's exactly how you get it there. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So it occurs to me with everything you have available here, and this is fantastic. I had not used the state website quite a while. I've got into career cruising.
Sure.
Really, one reason,
What's that?
electronic portfolios. So the moment the state provides school districts with electronic portfolios,
What is an electronic?
well, the kid has to have a portfolio to track through documentation
Okay.
of different stuff for career readiness.
Right.
And so all you need is this humongous cloud up there for us.
You know,
And a format for us to dump stuff into the portfolio to meet career and education tools.
and I think
And I wouldn't have to pay for it.
every year, yeah, every year the governor puts out these go time initiatives to like save money or create better efficiencies. I'm gonna steal that and submit it this year. That we can link these systems. For what we pay for Deloitte to build it, like, they should just throw that in for us for free. Thank you. Anything else on big interview? The next one's real easy, and then we're gonna hop into career coach with the time I have left. Just because I always save it for last because it's my favorite. But okay. This last one here is just an MOS translator, military occupational experience. This tends to be used most by folks who come back from service and translating what they did in the military to civilian work. You put in your military-specific job code, and it'll give you a list of occupations that match up to that in the civilian world, in the standard occupation civilian structure. One other way that I've found that people have been able to use this in the past is that if you're looking, or you're working with a young person that's planning on going into the military, you can look at types of things they'd like to specialize in the military and what that might align to when they get back to the civilian world. So that if, say, you know, they really want to get into auto mechanic work when they get back from the military, they have a passion for cars, you know, what would be the best thing for them to work on when they're in the military. So just another possibility of how to use that tool. This is probably the most straightforward out of the 4 of them. You basically type in the code, hit go, and it gives you a list. To be completely honest, I think the military translator tool in the next thing I'm going to show you is a little bit better than the one that they've, this is being recorded, isn't it? A little bit better than the one we got for here, but I'll show you both of them to let you guys decide. So, the last one here is Pennsylvania Career Coach. It says still in development. It is. I was really, really hoping that we'd have that site live that I'd be able to tell you about. We had this a little over 2 years ago. We had it. We had built the system in partnership with a vendor with some grant money left over from ARRA. It was really well liked. It got shut down because I'm still bitter that it got shut down, so I don't want to share too many of my personal feelings about what went wrong there. Basically, somebody looked at the wrong metric for how many people were using it and shut it off without asking any of the people, and I have this stack of letters on my desk of all the people that wrote in to say bring it back. But we are bringing it back. So I'm actually going to hop off the PowerPoint here and go out and show you what this looks like. I'm hoping before the end of the year that we can have this ready to go. But this is the PA Career Coach. It's pretty straightforward. It's really easy to use. As you can see, there's the Are You a Veteran there on the bottom left. It's another military translator. There's a Take a Career assessment. This is the same type of assessment that's found in our career guide. There's two versions of it. There's a 6-question and a 60-question. After you do either of them, it'll bring up a list of occupations that match up to, you know, what your interests are. Help get that search started. I know when I was in school, there was really none of that. It was all college prep, and there was no thought about why I wanted to go to college, just that everybody else was doing it. This really didn't happen in college either, and so I waited tables for a couple of years until I decided it was probably time to find something to do with my college degree. Here I am. You can browse careers. These are actually, I believe, set up on the educational career clusters. So if you click on any of them, it'll bring up specific occupations within a career cluster. Go into journalism and broadcasting, it'll give you technical writers. It gives you some wage information and the type of education. And then you click on a specific one, it gives you the number of job postings in the area based on, I believe these are all set up on Pennsylvania right now as a default until we launch it live. I think the last thing we're working on right now is getting the zip code specs in there so that people can search within mileage from their own zip code. But I'm told that progress is going well. It gives you institutions near where you are where you can get the education required to get into that field. And then these are related careers. So we're looking at broadcast journalism and then you know, radio and television, digital communications, so on and so forth. Now if you go into employment, it'll give you graphs of what it looks like, the number of people, the number of companies, the number of people working in these types of jobs. This is all going to link into our Job Gateway job feed, so it's going to give you the companies that have the postings for this type of work. It's a pretty comprehensive system. So before I get into my favorite part of this, did anybody have any questions about what's included so far in the system? Sure, go ahead.
Is this site going to be on that Job Gateway or what?
I don't have an answer for you yet. That's part of the conversation. Originally, it was just a link within Job Gateway, and you got bounced out to its own hosting site. That ended up being one of the downfalls because they looked at the number of clicks that came through the Job Gateway site to here, and so many folks were going in directly into pacareercoach.org or Gov or whatever it was, and so we never got credit from the analytics side. The number of people were using it. We could have reached out to the company. We didn't, but I don't know. My hope is that it's going to be a free hosted site that we can go directly to. You can put a link on your browser, just hit straight to it every time. I'd say I'm probably about 75% sure that'll be how it works out because it's just easier to do and it'll cost us less money. But it might end up going to the Job Gateway system. Yes?
So is this one a little bit different, because I work middle school, mostly high school, and we use PA Career Zone a lot.
Right.
So is the data on PA Career Zone going to match up with PA Career Coach, or are we looking at two different levels of people?
I'm not 100% sure where the data that populates the PA Career Zone comes from. If PA Career Zone is using our data, like the state-produced data, it should. My concern might be that a lot of programs like that, like ONET, will go in and bring in the national data, which isn't wrong. You know, that data is still accurate, correct, produced by the same means. It just doesn't get as localized as what we produce. And it depends what vendor produces PA Career Zone. We went through a lot of trouble to make sure that as much of our data gets incorporated in here, especially as far as the job postings and the jobs. But some of the employment numbers come from the vendor just because that was what we were able to work out with the contract.
So this is probably geared towards more involved than somebody who might.
Oh, no, I wouldn't say geared toward. We actually set this up, this version that you're looking at here is more of a canned off the shelf version that they sell. It's more for a community college. But I found on usability here that this is, it's a very easy system to use. It's easy to register for, and I don't want to put a grade level to it or anything like that, but I wouldn't say this is overly cumbersome for a middle school student to use, or especially a high school student. I only have 5 minutes, so I want to do this because this is literally my favorite thing that's in here. I know that creating resumes is always a big thing and a big challenge for people all across the spectrum of job seekers. And there are a ton of resume building tools out there at cost, that cost your organization money or cost the user money. This is included for free. And it's honestly better than the other ones I've seen out there. So it brought in my information. I created a dummy registration just for the presentation today, so all I put in is my name and my email. But during your registration, if you fill all this out, it'll bring it into the resume for you. The work experience is probably my favorite part of this. So if I add work experience, and I'm just going to put in I was a cashier. I worked with a counselor who, she had a girl that worked at Wendy's, and she said, "What'd you do there?" She said, "I was a cashier." She said, "Okay, well, what'd you do there?" And she's like, "I was a cashier." And she said, "Well, that, I need to know what you actually did there." And so she pulled up this, and she said, "Well, did you receive payments by cash, check, credit card?" Yeah, I did that. Did you help customers and help them with their complaints?" "Well, yeah, all the time." So check that. "Did I say hi to the people that were coming into the establishment?" "Well, yeah, I did that." "Did you do any stocking duties, mark prices on anything?" "Well, yeah, a little bit, sure." "Did you deal with any merchandise returns?" Yeah, I did." "And was there anything else that didn't show up on the list?" "Yeah, I did. I wrote schedules." All right, I had a custom task in here too. So now we go in here and we hit save and close, and then we go to, and now you can also add in your educational history, specific skills, professional links. I don't want to take up too much time because I'm running out. You click on the download button. It kicks it out here on the bottom in a Word doc, and it brings up a resume for you.